I'm a living landscapes officer with the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, basically looking after our 13 nature reserves in the Yorkshire Dales. This hedge has almost been entirely laid by volunteers and a few staff who've helped to train them, and many of those people were beginners when we started on this hedge 4 years ago. We've laid about 280 metres of hedge in that time. Hedges are fantastic for wildlife. There's a study being done recently where a 100-metre section of hedge was found to have over 2,000 species of plants and animals in it. It's good because it's a corridor between existing woodlands. It can be a real sort of safe route for things like shrews and voles and mice to get through. It's fantastic for birds to nest in, to feed in. So we will have ground nesting birds in there. We'll have birds like dunnocks and robins, and blackbirds and thrushes, and then higher up in the trees, things like crows. It's also brilliant for some of the birds of prey, so like the owls and the kestrels will often sit on top of the hedge waiting for a mouse or a shrew to go by. They're special for the plants within them as well. There's all sorts of very important wildflowers exist within hedges, especially as the hedge gets older and more dense. You get the sort of a fringe of that with many, many different wildflowers within it. Lots of different creatures, things like stoats use them for hunting. Hedgehogs will set up home in them amongst the sort of deadwood and leaf litter. It's a really good place for sparrowhawks to come and hunt. One of my wildlife highlights, if you like, is to see sparrowhawks flying down one side of a hedge, ready to ambush the other side, and they almost barrel roll over the hedge and catch the birds out on the other side, and it's just a spectacular wildlife sight to see in our country. The hedges are also really good as a shelter for insects, not just within the hedge itself, but on a sort of windy day, one side of the hedge will be a lot less windy than the other, a lot more sheltered. Bees like the hedges and take the nectar from the flowers when the fields next to it aren't in flower, so it can be a really important food source for the bees as well. Some of those woodlands around here have actually got dormice. Not many places in Yorkshire have dormice, certainly not in the Dales. The National Park are doing a big project to actually reconnect those woodlands, which means the dormice can expand into new ranges. You're very unlikely to see dormice. They're very, very secretive creatures, but hedges play a really important role in their conservation.
We were keeping an eye on butterflies when they were around. We were keeping an eye on bees when they were around. And we've been doing a project on two sides of a huge field here, looking for hazel dormice, not just bog standard dormice, but hazel dormice. It's a particular species of dormice. Very small, they're about 10 centimetres maximum, including their tail. They are protected, and they're quite rare. They're certainly quite rare around here.
So the People's Trust for Endangered Species have developed this Dormouse tunnel surveying method so that volunteers can get involved. So the idea is that a mouse which is naturally curious will be going along the branches and they'll see this tunnel and they'll think, oh, what's inside there?
And in the tunnel there's a little plastic tube, and in the tunnel you put a piece of wood, and on the piece of wood you put a bit of white card, and then at either end of the white card you put some ink that doesn't set.
So they'll run through, get ink on their feet and make footprints for us. They don't like running along the floor. They like to be in the branches, and a hedgerow, which is naturally complicated and with lots of branches, is perfect for them.
So yeah, for the last 2 months, maybe more, I've been examining the 20 tunnels on a rota basis and seeing whether there's anything there. And there has been. But the footprints that are there turn out not to have been hazel dormice, but just mice. Doesn't necessarily mean that the hedge isn't any good, but it does mean that the hazel dormice, which actually have quite a small catchment area, they don't migrate far from where they are. While they may not be there, there are other mice there, which at least means that there are small mammals in that hedge.
We know that there are records for hazel dormice in the area, and what we'd like to do in the future is to increase the habitat, increase the connectivity using hedgerows so that they have a wider range. And we know that they're nearby, so knowing that they're not here now means that if we then saw them in the future, we would know that we were having an impact.
So hedges are really important for wildlife. They're really important for stock control. They do serve a purpose in terms of the farmland as well. But in terms of wildlife, they are so species rich. We've lost so many hedges over the last 50 to 100 years. So if we can preserve what we have and maintain them, that gives you a permanent hedge, if you like, within the landscape. Planting a hedge is one of the best things you can do. That and creating a pond in your garden, they really are the two best things you can do. That will mean you'll get birds nesting in there, you'll get interesting insects and things like that. The countryside's had a tough time over the last 15, 20, 25 years, but actually there's reason for optimism at the moment. There's a lot of good nature recovery strategies being developed, and hopefully those will help in the long term and help us get back to a wildlife-rich country.